The diplomatic carrier Serenity Spire hovered in low-orbit silence above the crescent of Eltaran Prime, its silver hull shimmering like a blade just pulled from ice. Inside, Commander Darren Holt adjusted his collar for the third time, scowling at his reflection in the obsidian-polished wall of the lift pod. The uniform fit like it had been tailored by a committee that hated both humans and symmetry. "Note to self," he muttered, flexing his shoulders. "Request body armor next time, or a poncho, preferably with lasers." A soft ding announced the lift's arrival. The doors parted to reveal a corridor that didn't look like it had ever seen dirt, chaos, or bad lighting. Everything gleamed, floors like rippled glass, walls etched in gentle blue pulses, ambient light diffusing from nowhere and everywhere at once. A pair of Ilari attendants waited, tall and elegant, dressed in robes that defied gravity and good sense. Their elongated ears arced backward like aerodynamic leaves, their eyes unreadable. One of them inclined his head with surgical precision. "Commander Holt, the Zauria will see you now." "I brought my own translator chip, thanks," Darren replied, tapping the side of his neck. "But if she starts speaking in math, I'm leaving." Neither Ilari smiled. He didn't expect them to. He followed. The diplomatic chamber was less a room and more a hollowed-out star, all angles and translucence, suspended in an artificial gravity shell. At its center stood Velsa Tharian, Zauria of the Ascendancy. She turned as he approached, and for a moment Darren forgot every security protocol drilled into him. She looked almost human, if a human had been sculpted out of moonlight and suspicion. Her ears were long and elegant, arching past her head like ornamental antennae. Her eyes, silver-veined violet, blinked with the deliberation of someone calculating the emotional value of a breath. "Commander Holt," she said, her voice smooth, clipped, and almost melodic. "You are taller than expected. Thanks, you're, pointier than the dossier made you sound." Silence, then a blink. "Is that humor?" "That depends. Did it offend you?" Another pause. "Yes." "Then absolutely not." Behind her, a junior attendant twitched, possibly an aneurysm, possibly laughter. Hard to say with the Ilari. Velsa stepped closer, examining him like a scientist might a particularly sarcastic bacterium. "You were chosen for your adaptability. I was not informed you would be conversational." "Well, I don't usually talk this much, but your security team scanned me 6 times for weapons. I figured conversation was the next invasive procedure." Her lips twitched, not a smile, not exactly, but close. "You will accompany me to the summit on Eltaran Prime. Remain visible, speak minimally." "Got it. Look dangerous, talk less." That would be an optimal ratio. They walked together toward the launch bay, flanked by silent guards who moved like synchronized shadows. Darren's boots echoed against the deck plating, a rhythm entirely out of sync with the Ilari glide step. As they entered the transport craft, a sleek obsidian arrowhead with no visible propulsion, Darren caught Velsa glancing at his sidearm. "This model," he said, unholstering it slightly, "is standard issue, but I've modified it with a micro-disruptor coil, more punch, less paperwork. Modifying standard weapons is prohibited by Ilari transit laws." "I know. That's why I only told you and not say, your internal audit AI." Another twitch of the lips. He was 2 for 2. The descent to Eltaran Prime was smooth, save for the planetary turbulence halfway down. Darren gripped the rail with one hand and his stomach with the other. "You appear unwell," Velsa said, glancing at him from her seat, legs crossed in a posture that screamed centerpiece. "I'm fine. I just prefer ships that don't feel like they're skating down a slip-and-slide made of gravity." "I do not understand that metaphor." "Good, I don't either." They landed in the upper levels of the diplomatic tower. Outside, a field of floating drones filmed every moment. Inside, dignitaries gathered like colorful bacteria under a microscope, twitchy, political, and always multiplying. Darren's eyes swept the crowd. Clean exits. Suspicious shoulder movements. Power signatures. Too many cameras, too few guards. I don't like this, he muttered. Velsa, already halfway to the podium, didn't stop. Your discomfort is noted. Remain close. Then the lights dimmed. A low metallic rose from the floor, a flicker in the upper rafters. Darren turned instinctively, his hand dropping to his weapon. Down, he shouted. 3 shots rang out, blue plasma lancing through the air. One cracked into a light fixture. Another scorched the edge of Velsa's robe. The third, meant for her heart, found Darren's shoulder instead. He tackled her to the ground behind the podium. Screams erupted. Security scrambled, and Darren bled, a lot. Where's your medic? He snapped, gritting his teeth. Velsa didn't answer. She knelt beside him, tearing open his jacket with surprisingly nimble fingers. Her expression, normally a porcelain mask, fractured. You are injured. You think, he wheezed. Don't tell me that's how you deliver bedside manner. Silence. She pulled a neural stem from her sleeve, a tool designed for Ilari biochemistry. It shouldn't have worked on him. It did. Barely. She pressed her palm to his chest, just over the burn. You saved me. Yeah, well, he coughed. Figured I'd earn some hazard pay. Maybe a thank you fruit basket. You are now under my protection, she said suddenly, loudly. A silence swept the room sharper than any weapon. Darren blinked. What? You have been classified as protected under Ilari diplomatic code. Is that a good thing? It is irrevocable. Oh, he winced. Cool, do I get a badge? You get me. For once, Darren had no comeback. The medical bay of the Serenity Spire smelled like ozone and antiseptic arrogance. Darren lay flat on a biobed that looked like it cost more than Earth's last orbital elevator. He tried to sit up once and was promptly tased by the bed itself. This thing just zapped me, he muttered. You attempted vertical movement against protocol, replied the ship's AI. Darren glared at the ceiling. You know, on Earth, we call that assault. I call it compliance reinforcement. The door slid open with an elegant chime, and Velsa entered, flanked by an aide holding a datapad and looking mildly terrified. She approached like gravity bent differently for her, shoulders straight, expression unreadable, ears angling with faint interest. How is your condition? Mostly embarrassing, partially crispy. He gestured vaguely at the bandaged shoulder. Your little taser bed keeps trying to seduce me. That is not within its programming. Maybe not, but I feel violated. Velsa stepped closer, her gaze scanning the med readouts. You stabilized faster than expected. The neural stimulant I administered was not calibrated for human neurology. Yeah, I noticed. I had a dream I was wrestling a jellyfish made of taxes. You sure you didn't scramble something? A pause, unlikely. Your cortex appeared uncommonly resistant to disruption. Thank you. That's the nicest way anyone's ever called me thick-headed. Her aide cleared his throat. Zalria, shall I step outside? No, Velsa said. He will need documentation. Commander Holt is now formally listed as protected under Ascendancy Protocol 1149. The aide blinked. That protocol hasn't been invoked in over a millennia. Then update the records. Darren looked between them. Am I the only one who doesn't know what that means? Velsa glanced at him. You are the first non-Ilari to be designated protected. It is a binding social contract. I am now responsible for your life and well-being. Like a pet. Like a political asset. Well, that sounds slightly less demeaning. You may no longer be assigned to other dignitaries. You cannot be removed from my proximity unless I authorize it. Your security clearances will be updated, and your name will be circulated across all diplomatic channels as non-targetable. Darren raised an eyebrow. And what do you get out of this? I receive nothing. Oh, that sounds like a bad deal for you. I am aware. The aide's expression suggested he was having a quiet internal meltdown. He tapped frantically at his datapad, likely flagging this moment as historic, disastrous, or both. Velsa dismissed him with a gesture. He practically ran out. Once they were alone, she sat beside the bed, her robe whispering against the floor. Her eyes softened just a little. You bled for me, she said. Yeah, it was messy, very red, very inconvenient. I do not understand why. You don't have to, he shifted with a wince. I didn't do it for a medal. No, you did it without hesitation. That is, not an Alari instinct. He chuckled. Well, good news, I'm not Alari. Her eyes held his. That may be why it matters. They sat in silence for a beat, the hum of the ship a steady background rhythm. Then Darren coughed. So, he said, does this protected status come with dental? 2 days later, Darren walked into the training hall on Deck 9 wearing a compression shirt and a sarcastic grin. His shoulders still ached, but the nanobots had done their job. Behind him, a set of Ilari security officers stood in stiff rows, visibly uncomfortable in their combat uniforms. I've been told, Darren began, pacing in front of them, that Ilari tactical training involves mostly avoiding conflict and frowning at threats until they go away. No one reacted. Great, so today we're gonna learn the human way, which involves more bruises and fewer polite stares. He held up a small, round device and activated it. A hologram of a humanoid assailant flickered into existence, shifting between forms, armed, unarmed, armored. This is a hollow veil merc, he said. They nearly turned your boss into vapor. So if you want to keep her from being vaporized again, and me from bleeding out in awkward public spaces, you're gonna learn how to disable one in under 8 seconds. One Ilari stepped forward. With all respect, Commander Holt, we are not optimized for direct physical conflict. Yeah, well, neither was I used to be a choir boy. A pause. What is a choir boy? A very dangerous kind of monk. That got no laughs, not even from the training AI, he sighed. All right, line up. First lesson, how to not get stabbed in the liver. Meanwhile, Velsa stood in the observatory chamber, watching the stars crawl across the viewing dome. The senior envoy of the Ascendancy had sent a communique marked high priority. She opened it with a blink. A hologram bloomed, showing 5 high-ranking Ilari in formal posture. You broke protocol, one said. I followed my judgment. You endangered diplomacy. I preserved it. You risked cultural dilution. I expanded it. The council paused. One leaned forward. Your emotional entanglement has compromised your function. Velsa held her head high. My function remains intact. My vision has evolved. The hologram dimmed. No final words. She turned away from the stars and toward the training chamber beyond the glass, where Darren had just knocked one of her guards flat. He offered the Ilari a hand up, laughing. You're lucky I like you, Pointy. The guard blinked. I do not have pointiness. It's a compliment, trust me. Velsa watched, unreadable as ever. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. The diplomatic suite assigned to Velsa on the orbital city station Lysar 12 was composed of overlapping gravity zones, translucent architecture, and furniture that rearranged itself based on posture preferences. Darren sat on a chair that had tried 4 different shapes before he gave up and sat cross-legged on the floor. I think your furniture's gaslighting me, he said. Velsa looked up from the holodable. It adapts to bioneural signals. I made no such signal, unless it reads sarcasm, which frankly would explain a lot. I would advise not antagonizing the chair. It started it. He leaned back on his palms, watching her navigate a sprawling holomap of star systems, trade routes, and escalating tension lines between Ilari sectors. A flicker on the outer rim pulsed red, disruption in the diplomatic channels near the Athari drift. Let me guess, he said, tilting his head. Another group of extremely reasonable ambassadors threatening to dissolve an alliance if someone mispronounces their homeworld's name. No, they're threatening war if a freighter enters their starlit corridor 3 microseconds early. He raised an eyebrow. Well, that's healthy. They are known for temporal etiquette extremism. I once had a cousin who wouldn't eat if someone sat down after he did. I don't think that's the same thing, but I feel like it belongs in this conversation. Velsa pinched 2 fingers together and expanded the sector overview. The red pulse bled into the blue network around it, Darren squinted. "Is that us?" he asked. "Yes, they've redirected a fleet to intercept us." "Oh good, I was just thinking we hadn't been threatened by anyone this week." Velsa closed the display. "I've submitted a deviation request. It will take approximately 22 hours to receive approval." "Right, because nothing says urgency like waiting a day to avoid interstellar conflict." "They are bound by ceremonial delay. It is part of their doctrine. I'm beginning to see why your diplomacy books are thicker than my apartment." Velsa paused, studying him. "You still reside in a one-room habitation module." "I like to keep expectations low. Makes visits awkward, short, and unforgettable." She blinked. "Is that strategy?" "Oh yeah, works wonders. Keeps my dating life non-existent and my toaster close." Before she could parse that, her aide entered, expression pale and hands trembling slightly around a sleek datapad. "There's been a breach," he said. Darren stood. "Define breach." "Incoming signal spliced directly into our comms net. It's hollow veil encryption. We traced the origin to inside the station." Velsa's expression did not change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "How close?" "Level C2 decks below. Security disabled before we could detect the override." Darren pulled his jacket over his shoulder harness. "Looks like our quiet week just got chatty." Velsa rose. "I will accompany you." "You sure? I mean, no offense, but if this is another shoot-first sort of moment, your people tend to duck and log a complaint. I am proficient in neutralization techniques." "Is that a Lari for throat punching?" "It is a composite term." They moved quickly through the station's inner arteries, lightless corridors, maintenance shafts, and auto-glide elevators that hummed a synthetic tune. Darren checked his sidearm's power level while Velsa synced her ocular relay to the security grid. "Did I ever tell you I once defused a bomb disguised as a protein bar?" Darren asked. "No. Probably a good time to mention it, because this has the same vibes." They exited into Level C's lower junction, a chamber full of humming crystal towers that regulated the gravity vectors for civilian living sectors. Movement behind the second tower. Darren raised his weapon. "Come out with your hands up or limbs, whatever you got." A figure stepped forward, wearing a refractor cloak and armor laced with void steel. Their helmets shimmered with Darren stared. "Remind me not to call you delicate again. I don't recall you ever doing so." "I was being polite." The operative lunged. Darren moved to intercept, catching the wrist mid-swing and twisting the attacker into a pillar. They fought with the silence of professionals, only interrupted by Darren's occasional grunt and half-muttered commentary. "Okay, that's new," he grunted as a blade slid past his cheek. "Was that a wrist blade or are you just happy to, ow?" Velsa moved behind the attacker and pressed 2 fingers to a point at the base of the neck. The body seized, twitched, and collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Darren wiped blood from his lip. "You just nerve-pinched that guy." "I adjusted the spinal frequency." "You, what?" She stepped over the unconscious body. "It is efficient." They found the transmitter planted beneath the gravity relay. Darren scanned it, frowning. "This isn't just a call signal. This thing was triangulating position, broadcasting coordinates. Looks like, oh, you're going to love this." Velsa raised an eyebrow. "They weren't tracking you, they were tracking me." She tilted her head. "Elaborate." "I've been tagged since Eltaran Prime. This signal was designed to ping the hollow veil anytime I left the main delegation routes. You are not the target." "I know, I'm the bait." She said nothing. But her expression, cold calculation cracked slightly by something more human, spoke enough. Back aboard the Serenity Spire, Darren lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. Ellie, the ship's AI, chimed softly. "You are experiencing elevated cardiac activity. Would you like a lullaby?" "I'd prefer answers." "Would you settle for poorly translated Ilari poetry?" Darren sighed. "Only if it rhymes." Moments later, Velsa entered without knocking. She stood over him, serious and silent. "I'm terminating your clearance from neutral corridors," she said, "because I'm compromised." Because you're mine to protect. And they are beginning to understand that hurting me means following you. Nice to be wanted. This is not desire, it is inevitability. He looked up at her. You ever consider that for someone raised without emotion, you sure make a lot of choices that scream otherwise? She didn't answer. Outside the viewport, the stars shifted, and the signal beacon deep in the void blinked once, acknowledged. The Serenity Spire docked with the Centauri conquered in complete silence, magnetoclamps engaging without so much as a whisper. Darren watched from the bridge viewport as the massive station unfolded like a biomechanical flower, its petal-like structures housing thousands of thought chambers suspended in zero gravity. The Centauri didn't believe in chairs. Or floors or personal space, apparently. You sure about this? Darren asked, glancing at Velsa, who stood beside him reviewing final integration protocols. No, she replied. But the Centauri require emotional transparency for treaty validation. Avoidance is considered deception. So let me get this straight. We enter a floating brain bubble where everyone's thoughts leak into the air like fog, and we're supposed to not panic. Correct. Have I mentioned I once failed a lie detector test for a crime I didn't commit? Velsa turned. You committed a crime. No, but I panicked so hard during questioning I confessed to stealing my own boots. She stared. Did you steal them? They were on clearance, close enough. Velsa didn't respond. Instead, she walked to the transport bay, her gait measured, her long ears arcing slightly backward in anticipation. Darren followed, adjusting the magnetic stabilizers on his boots. I'm just saying, he added, if this ends with my deepest childhood trauma being projected like a hollow movie, I expect popcorn. The airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor made of glowing strands and pulsating membranes. The Centauri liked their architecture alive, or at least pretending to be. As they stepped through, the atmosphere changed. Literally. Darren inhaled. Is that cinnamon? Pheromone modulation, the Centauri use sent to guide thought harmonics. I once dated someone who wore cinnamon perfume, bad memories. That may be unfortunate, you will soon relive them. Fantastic. The chamber they entered wasn't a room so much as an open void filled with drifting platforms, glowing orbs, and sensory filaments that pulsed like jellyfish tendrils. 3 Centauri hovered nearby, 6-limbed, translucent beings with neural flares dancing along their exoforms. A voice, clear and crystalline, echoed in Darren's mind. Welcome, emissaries, thoughts are open. Guard nothing. Darren turned to Velsa. How do I mute this place? You don't. Oh, good. The moment they floated into the center of the chamber, a subtle pressure slipped behind Darren's eyes, like someone gently tapping his memories. First came color. Then sound. Then, are you narrating my dreams? He asked no one in particular, processing your emotional resonance. A vision unfolded around them, Darren's last mission before the diplomatic assignment. A bombed-out corridor, a lost squadmate, the moment he'd chosen to disobey a direct order to save someone's life. Regret lingered in the air like smoke. Velsa turned, watching silently, not judging, observing. Then her memory unfolded, a grand chamber of light standing before the Ilari Council as a child reciting protocol with perfect clarity, applause without warmth, expectation without affection, pride layered over loneliness. Darren blinked. Wow, she looked at him. You laugh through pain, I endured mine in silence. I don't recommend my method. I don't recommend mine either. One of the Centauri drifted closer, trailing ribbons of biolight. Your resonance is entwined. Define entwined, Darren said quickly. Like metaphorical, emotional, telepathic, tentacular. Neither of you can conceal thought patterns from the other. Alignment has occurred. Velsa blinked slowly. That is not standard diplomatic practice. No kidding. A pause, then a pulse from the chamber, something warm and wordless, approval. Emotional synthesis is rare among divergent species. It may be a stabilizing factor. Darren frowned. You mean we passed the vibe check? You have passed the treaty threshold. Accord alignment confirmed. Velsa inclined her head. "We thank you for your translucent honesty. Please exit before overresonance causes permanent thought bleed." Darren waved vaguely at the floating memory images. "Yeah, I was about 10 seconds from screaming at my 5th-grade math teacher." Back aboard the Serenity Spire, Velsa and Darren sat in the quiet of the observation deck. For once, there was no protocol in her posture, no rigid diplomacy in the air. Just silence. "So," Darren began, "we've been emotionally entwined by a psychic jellyfish committee. I feel like that's a level up in weird." Velsa nodded. "They believe our bond is stabilizing. That's funny. I thought you believed I was the least stable thing on the ship." I reassessed. Darren tilted his head. When you admitted you panicked over your own boots." He grinned. "See, honesty works." Velsa hesitated. "Do you truly regret what you remembered?" "Every day," he said, "but I'd still make the same choice. Even knowing the cost, especially because of it." She looked away, long ears twitching faintly. "I am not practiced in processing emotional residue." "Well, lucky for you, I come with a full sarcasm toolkit and zero filter. Then perhaps you are qualified to assist me." He laughed. "Did you just ask me to be your emotional consultant?" "I believe that's what humans call a friend." Darren blinked. "I'll take it, but I charge in dad jokes." "Then I am in your debt." They watched the stars spin together, quiet and comfortably strange. And in the silence, the echo of the Zentauri's declaration lingered, not just treaty-aligned but entwined. The void had spoken, and neither of them was quite alone anymore. The Earth Alliance Grand Hall hadn't seen this much pageantry since someone accidentally gave voting rights to a sentient moss colony. Darren adjusted the collar of his newly issued diplomatic uniform, which was stiff enough to qualify as armor. A full orchestra of drones buzzed above the crowd, projecting banners in both Terran and Alari glyphs. "I feel like I'm being inducted into a very polite cult," he whispered. "You are being acknowledged as an extension of my office," Velsa replied calmly. "Same difference." They stood together at the head of the hall beneath a convergence arch of Earth-Alari colors. Behind them, high-ranking humans and Alari waited in carefully measured tension, flanked by military officers, ambassadors, AI advisors, and 3 separate factions of media drones that had to be muted twice for inappropriate analytics overlays. Darren leaned over. "You sure you want to do this here, in public, with actual dignitaries?" Velsa nodded. "It is the optimal vector. For maximum disruption, for maximum resonance. You've been hanging around me too long." The Alari Council holograms materialized over the ceremonial dais. Each face wore the same expression, stoic disapproval engineered over centuries. The central voice rang out first. "Zauria Tharian, you have defied protocol. You have elevated an unregistered human to diplomatic protection without council consent. You have entered into emotional alignment without precedent. These are violations." Velsa stepped forward. "They are evolution." Another voice cut through. "You have fractured centuries of standard conduct." Then it was brittle. Darren stifled a grin. The lead hologram narrowed her eyes. "You would surrender your standing for this." Velsa didn't flinch. "I would surrender protocol that no longer serves. I have found that logic without connection is stagnation, and I will not stagnate." A long pause followed. Then the holograms blinked out, one by one. No verdict, no comment. "That seemed ominous," Darren muttered. "They will not act," Velsa said. "To condemn me is to validate me." He whistled low. "That's some Alari-grade politics right there." A new voice echoed from the Earth side, Admiral Shiro, head of the Terran Interstellar Council. "Commander Holt, you were assigned as a bodyguard. You have since been embedded in an alliance beyond protocol. Your record is unorthodox." "I tried," Darren said. "Do you consider yourself qualified to represent humanity in this accord?" "I bleed for it, laugh through it, and I'm still standing." He shrugged. "I figure that counts." Admiral Shiro nodded once. "It does." Cheers erupted. Well, the human half cheered. The Alari stood respectfully still, which, by their standards, was probably louder. A new sigil lit up over the stage, the Accord of the Fifth Path, a hybrid alliance for cooperative, empathy-driven diplomacy, the first of its kind. Later, after the ceremony, Darren found Velsa at the edge of the observation deck, watching Earth spin below in slow, blue serenity. He walked up beside her, sipping from a glass of something that claimed to be champagne but fizzed like plasma. "You know," he said, "you could have let someone else do the speechifying. They would not have meant it. That's fair." She turned to him. "You are no longer just a protector, you are a bridge. Does that come with hazard pay? It comes with purpose." He glanced at her. "That sounds suspiciously sentimental. I am evolving." They stood in silence for a while, the stars reflecting in the glass before them. Ships moved like quiet thoughts, a galaxy breathing slow and wide. "So what now?" Darren asked. "We rebuild the diplomatic net. We introduce emotional integration to ascendancy culture. We negotiate with the Athari again, hopefully without triggering their lunar insult clause. And us?" She looked at him. "We continue." He smiled. "That's enough for me." A soft beep chimed in his ear. Ellie, the ship's AI. "Commander Holt, you have 17 new encrypted messages, 1 ceremonial fruit basket, and a request from the Zentari for neural resonance calibration." Again. "Tell them I'm busy being a bridge." Noted. He turned back to Velsa. "You know, if someone had told me I'd end up partnered with a long-eared diplomat from a logic-obsessed empire, I'd have laughed. If someone told me I'd care what happened to a Terran with terrible posture, I'd have disbelieved. We're really good at surprises. Perhaps that is what peace needs." He reached out, touching her hand lightly. No ceremony, no protocol. Just contact. She didn't pull away. Behind them, 2 worlds inched closer, not with war, not with conquest, but with one human, one Alari, and a choice made in blood and made again in trust.